And Jeff's version's totally different. The version that I did was closer to the Muddy Waters version.
Jimmy Page spent his career setting a standard that almost nobody could reach. Led Zeppelin didn't just influence rock music, they defined what it was capable of. So when Page openly named another band as worthy of standing alongside that legacy, people stopped and listened. Because this wasn't a throwaway comment in a forgotten interview. It came from someone who had spent decades watching bands try and fail to capture what Led Zeppelin had built. The group he chose wasn't the one most people expected, and his reason for choosing them makes the answer even more surprising. Behind Led Zeppelin's rise, Jimmy Page was born in 1944 in a suburb of West London. When he was still young, his family moved to a house on Miles Road in Epsom, Surrey. It was there that something unexpected quietly changed the course of his life. While settling into their new home, the family discovered an old Spanish guitar. No one ever figured out where it came from. Maybe the previous owners left it behind. Maybe a family friend placed it there. Whatever the truth was, the mystery was never solved. At first, the guitar meant very little to Page. It sat there unnoticed for a while, but when he finally picked it up, everything changed. At the age of 12, he learned a few basic chords from a friend at school. That was enough to spark something inside him. Before long, he had already outgrown what his friend could teach him. From there, he took matters into his own hands, teaching himself by listening to records and figuring out songs by ear. Ironically, the reason he started playing wasn't some grand dream of becoming a rock star. Years later, Page simply admitted that he picked up the guitar because he was bored. What began as a way to pass the time quickly became an obsession. He carried his guitar to school almost every day, squeezing in practice whenever he had a spare moment. It didn't take long before his teachers became frustrated. They regularly confiscated his guitar, hoping it would force him to focus on his studies instead. The biggest clash came with the school's deputy head, Miss Nicholson. She had little faith in his musical ambitions and openly dismissed the idea that playing guitar could ever become a real career. Rather than discourage him, her attitude only pushed him further away from school. Page did just enough to pass the minimum required exams before leaving school at 15, the youngest legal leaving age in Britain at the time. History would eventually prove that his teachers underestimated him, but they weren't entirely wrong about one thing. His obsession with music would come at a price. Not long after leaving school, singer Neil Christian discovered the teenage guitarist and invited him to join his touring band, the Crusaders. For a 15-year-old who dreamed of making music, it was an opportunity too good to refuse. Life on the road sounded exciting. The reality was far less glamorous. For 2 years, Page spent countless hours traveling in cramped vans, surviving on little food while constantly battling illness. The demanding schedule slowly wore him down until his health finally gave out. A severe case of glandular fever forced him to leave the band and return home. At the time, it felt like a crushing setback. Instead, it opened the door to something even bigger. Unable to tour, Page turned his attention to London's thriving recording scene. He became a session guitarist, recording for countless artists behind the scenes. Since another famous session player was already known as Big Jim Sullivan, the younger guitarist earned the nickname Lil Jim P to avoid confusion. His reputation grew at an astonishing pace. By the mid-1960s, he had become one of the busiest musicians in Britain, recording guitar parts for artists and bands such as The Who, The Kinks, The Rolling Stones, and many others. He even contributed incidental music to the Beatles' 1964 film A Hard Day's Night. One of his favorite early recordings came later that same year, when Shirley Bassey recorded the James Bond theme Goldfinger with composer John Barry's orchestra at Abbey Road Studios. Page was the guitarist on the session. Years later, he would still describe it as one of the highlights of his career before Led Zeppelin. Not every recording left him equally inspired. During the session for Engelbert Humperdinck's hit, Release Me, Page reportedly found the work so repetitive that he and fellow guitarist Big Jim Sullivan passed the time by playing pocket chess between takes. Humperdinck himself later remembered how uninterested the young guitarist seemed during the recording. By then, Page was beginning to burn out. At his busiest, he claimed he was working as many as 3 recording sessions every day, 5 days a week. The workload was exhausting, especially when many sessions involved playing the same parts over and over again. Still, all that hard work turned him into one of the most sought-after musicians in England. Some estimates even suggest he appeared on between 50 and 90% of all recordings made in Britain between 1963 and 1965. Eventually, however, the endless routine became too much. The breaking point came when someone asked him to record music for a Muzak session. Elevator music was not why he had devoted his life to the guitar. That assignment convinced him it was time to move on. In 1966, after years of being invited to join, Page finally accepted an offer to become a member of the Yardbirds. It was a huge step. The band had already built a legendary reputation and had previously featured Eric Clapton as its lead guitarist. Although Clapton and Page knew each other, they were never members of the Yardbirds at the same time. Instead, Page shared the stage with another guitar giant, Jeff Beck. For a brief period, 2 of Britain's greatest guitarists played together in the same band, creating one of rock music's most memorable lineups. Around the same time, another idea was taking shape. Before joining the Yardbirds, Page had jammed with Jeff Beck, John Entwistle, and Keith Moon in hopes of forming an entirely new supergroup. The project never got off the ground, but it left behind something unforgettable. Keith Moon jokingly suggested calling the band Led Zeppelin, after Entwistle joked that the project would go down like a lead balloon. Later, manager Peter Grant recommended dropping the A so people wouldn't pronounce it as lead. The name became Led Zeppelin. It would not be used immediately. By 1968, the Yardbirds had completely fallen apart, leaving Page as the last remaining member. Unfortunately, the band still had contractual obligations to perform several shows in Scandinavia. With little time to prepare, Page quickly assembled a new lineup. He recruited fellow session musician John Paul Jones on bass, then added singer Robert Plant and drummer John Bonham. The new group honored the existing commitments under the temporary name The New Yardbirds. The chemistry was obvious from the very beginning. Those performances convinced Page he had found something special. He wasted no time bringing the band into the studio, determined to capture their energy before it disappeared. Believing completely in the project, he paid for the recording sessions himself, using money he had earned during his years as a session musician. The band's debut album was completed in just 36 hours. The gamble paid off almost immediately. After hearing the finished record, Atlantic Records offered Led Zeppelin what was then one of the largest recording contracts in history. The deal included a $143,000 advance, worth roughly $1.25 million today, while giving the band remarkable creative control over their music, artwork, touring, and future releases. Perhaps even more remarkable was the fact that Atlantic committed to the deal without ever seeing the band perform live. Behind the scenes, another key figure was helping protect the group's future. Manager Peter Grant quickly earned a reputation as one of the toughest men in the music business. A former wrestler and nightclub bouncer, Grant used his intimidating presence to defend the band's financial interests and confront promoters or bootleggers who tried to take advantage of them. His aggressive approach changed how many concert promoters dealt with artists, helping musicians secure better pay and greater control over their careers. Still, even Grant couldn't solve every problem. In 1970, Led Zeppelin faced legal action in Denmark from Countess Eva von Zeppelin, who objected to the band using her family name. To avoid the dispute, the group performed one Copenhagen concert under the temporary name The Knobs. Away from the legal battles, Led Zeppelin's image became just as influential as its music. Jimmy Page's famous dragon suit became one of rock's most recognizable stage outfits, while the band's bold style helped shape the look of hard rock throughout the 1970s, and later influenced the glam metal scene of the 1980s. Decades later, elements of that fashion could still be seen in artists such as Jack White and Kings of Leon. Offstage, however, the band's reputation became increasingly notorious. Stories of destroyed hotel rooms, private jets, heavy partying, groupies, and lifetime bans from hotels became part of Led Zeppelin's growing legend. One infamous incident involving a shark became one of rock music's most controversial stories, although the details remain heavily disputed and have been retold in many different ways over the years. Looking back today, some behavior that was once dismissed as part of the rock and roll lifestyle is now viewed very differently. One of the darkest chapters involved Jimmy Page's relationship with Lori Mattix, also known as Lori Mattix or Lori Lightning. During Led Zeppelin's 1972 tour of the United States, Mattix was only 14 years old and was known around the Sunset Strip as one of the young girls drawn into the world of famous rock musicians. According to Mattix, after Page learned about her, the band's tour manager brought her to his hotel room, where a relationship soon began. It continued for more than 2 years. Because of her age, the relationship was illegal. Mattix later said that Page kept it hidden from public view and that she spent much of her time confined to hotel rooms while the band toured, seeing him mainly between performances. The relationship eventually ended after she discovered him with another woman. For many years afterward, Mattix said she believed they had genuinely been in love and saw nothing unusual about the age difference. But as public conversations around consent and power shifted, particularly during the Talk Me Too movement, she began viewing those events differently. She later said she would never want another young girl to experience what she had gone through. By today's standards, Page's actions are widely regarded as unacceptable and inexcusable. At the same time, those years also coincided with growing personal struggles that would continue to shape his life behind the scenes. The hidden chaos behind Zeppelin. By Jimmy Page's own admission, much of Led Zeppelin's 1973 North American tour became little more than a blur. Years later, he said he could barely remember it, a reflection of just how deeply substance use had taken hold. Things became even more serious by 1975 when he developed a heroin addiction that would last for roughly 7 years. The effects were impossible to ignore. His once flawless guitar playing became less consistent, his weight dropped dramatically, and he slowly drifted away from the rest of the band. During the making of In Through the Outdoor in 1978, his role in the songwriting was noticeably reduced. As Page struggled with addiction, bassist and keyboardist John Paul Jones stepped in and carried much of the creative workload. Although Page managed to overcome his addiction in the early 1980s, his legal troubles were not over. He was arrested twice for drug possession, first in 1982 and again in 1984. The consequences, however, were surprisingly light. The first conviction resulted in a conditional discharge lasting 1 year, while the second ended with a fine rather than the prison sentence that similar offenses often carried. Even so, those penalties were small compared to one of the biggest financial blows Led Zeppelin ever suffered. Just before the final concert of their record-breaking 1973 North American tour, someone stole $180,000 from the band's hotel safe deposit box. Adjusted for inflation, that would be worth well over $1 million today. After months of sold-out shows, the tour ended with one of the largest cash thefts in rock history. For Page, however, losing money was far from the worst thing that could happen on the road. Only a week before Led Zeppelin's 1975 North American tour began, he accidentally slammed his left ring finger in a train door, badly fracturing the tip of the bone. For most guitarists, such an injury would have forced them to cancel. Page chose a different path. Rather than postpone the tour, he redesigned his playing technique, relying on what he later called his 3.5-finger approach to get through each performance. The injury forced the band to temporarily remove demanding songs such as Dazed and Confused and Since I've Been Loving You from the set list. To cope with the pain, Page relied heavily on codeine and Jack Daniels throughout the tour. It was a remarkable display of determination, especially considering how fragile his health had been years earlier while touring with Neil Christian and the Crusaders. By then, endurance had become part of Led Zeppelin's identity. In their very first year together, the band completed 4 tours of the United Kingdom, 4 tours across the United States, and somehow found time to release 2 studio albums. Their concerts became legendary for another reason as well. A typical Led Zeppelin performance could stretch close to 4 hours, with songs expanding into long improvisational journeys that were never the same twice. No song captured that spirit better than Dazed and Confused. What began as a track on their debut album evolved into the centerpiece of their live performances. Even shorter versions often lasted around 20 minutes, while one famous performance at the Los Angeles Forum in 1975 stretched to an astonishing 43 minutes. Those marathon performances gave Page the perfect stage to experiment. One of his signature moments came when he picked up a violin bow and ran it across the strings of his electric guitar. Combined with distortion and echo effects, the technique produced eerie, haunting sounds unlike anything audiences had heard before. On other songs, especially Stairway to Heaven, he famously switched to a double-neck guitar so he could move seamlessly between 12-string and 6-string parts without changing instruments. While Page did not invent every one of these techniques, he helped turn them into defining images of rock music. His influence extended far beyond stage performance. Many historians credit Led Zeppelin with helping create the blueprint for heavy metal, particularly through the band's second album. Although the group itself resisted that label, there is little doubt that Page's powerful guitar work, layered production, and innovative studio techniques shaped the sound that countless heavy bands would later build upon. Ironically, just as fans associated Led Zeppelin with heavier music, Page was already looking in a different direction. During the summer of 1970, he and Robert Plant escaped to a quiet cottage in Wales to begin writing the band's third album. Surrounded by the countryside, both musicians became fascinated with traditional English and Celtic folk music. That influence transformed the record, replacing much of the band's trademark heaviness with acoustic guitars and folk-inspired melodies. When the album was released, many listeners were caught completely off guard. Fans who expected another hard rock masterpiece reacted harshly, and music critics were equally divided. Much like the controversy surrounding Bob Dylan's decision to go electric years earlier, Led Zeppelin's sudden shift in style sparked heated debate. For Page, the criticism only reinforced his growing distrust of the music press. He believed journalists wanted to trap the band inside a single musical identity instead of allowing them to evolve. That determination to stay in control shaped more than just the music itself. Anyone looking through Led Zeppelin's album credits may notice that each record featured a different recording engineer. That was no coincidence. Having learned countless studio techniques during his years as a session musician, Page knew exactly how he wanted the band to sound. By constantly changing engineers, he ensured that Led Zeppelin's unmistakable sound would always be credited to the band's own creative vision rather than any one producer behind the mixing desk. Control mattered deeply to him. So did his interests outside music. In the early 1970s, filmmaker Kenneth Anger approached Page to compose the soundtrack for his experimental film Lucifer Rising. The collaboration quickly fell apart. Anger publicly complained that after several years, Page had delivered only about 23 minutes of music for a 28-minute film. He dismissed the recordings as little more than repetitive droning sounds and suggested that Page's struggles with drugs had prevented him from finishing the project. Page strongly denied those accusations and eventually distanced himself completely from the film. Still, there was a reason Anger had approached him in the first place. For years, Page had been deeply fascinated by the occult, an interest that began in his youth after reading Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley. His fascination eventually became so strong that he purchased Boleskine House near Loch Ness, the Scottish estate once owned by Crowley himself. Page was especially drawn to Crowley's philosophy of self-liberation, the idea that individuals should break free from limitations and discover their true will. Some biographers have suggested that this philosophy also reflected the increasingly reckless lifestyle he embraced during the height of Led Zeppelin's fame. His interest in mysticism soon found its way into the band's public image as well. His famous dragon suit featured astrological symbols connected to his own birth chart, reflecting a fascination with astrology that many people at the time associated with the occult. The symbolism continued on Led Zeppelin IV. Inside the album sleeve appeared an illustration based on the tarot card known as the Hermit. The artwork was credited to an artist named Barrington Colby, yet almost nothing has ever been discovered about that mysterious painter. That mystery has fueled years of speculation that Page himself may have created the image. The theory is not impossible. Before fully committing to music, he had a strong interest in painting and even briefly attended art college. The connection became even more intriguing when The Song Remains the Same was released. During one of the film's fantasy sequences, Page is shown transforming into the Hermit, reinforcing the visual link between himself and the mysterious figure from the album artwork. The film, however, received a mixed reception. When it premiered in 1976, many critics dismissed it, and audiences in Britain were especially harsh. Part of the resentment came from the band's decision not to perform in the United Kingdom after 1975 because of their tax exile status, a move designed to avoid Britain's high income tax rates. To many British fans, it felt like the country's biggest rock band had turned its back on home. But those frustrations would soon seem insignificant. Behind the fame, the record-breaking tours, and the larger-than-life image, Led Zeppelin was entering its most painful chapter. Personal struggles were mounting, tensions were growing, and on September 24, 1980, tragedy struck in a way that would change the band's future forever. The death that ended Zeppelin. On September 24, 1980, drummer John Bonham was picked up by an assistant to head to rehearsals for the band's upcoming tour. Before leaving, Bonham decided he wanted breakfast, but instead of a typical meal, he drank 4 quadruple vodkas alongside a single ham roll. That was only the beginning. As rehearsals continued throughout the day, Bonham kept drinking heavily. By evening, the band returned to Jimmy Page's nearby home, believing the day was over. It wasn't. The following morning brought devastating news. Bonham had died during the night after choking on his own vomit while asleep at Page's house. The loss sent shockwaves through the band. Led Zeppelin immediately canceled the planned tour, but it quickly became clear that postponing concerts wasn't enough. Without Bonham, the group felt they could no longer continue. Soon afterward, they made the difficult decision to bring Led Zeppelin to an end. For Jimmy Page, the tragedy was deeply personal. The death of one of his closest friends pushed him into one of the darkest periods of his life. Those around him became increasingly concerned about his mental state as he withdrew from the world and continued struggling with drug use. The guitar that had defined his life remained untouched for nearly 2 years, a powerful symbol of just how deeply grief had consumed him. Eventually, Page began searching for a way back through music. His first attempt came with an ambitious supergroup featuring former Yes members Chris Squire on bass and Alan White on drums. The project showed promise during rehearsals but never developed into a full-fledged band. Even though the music never materialized, the group did come up with a memorable name. They called themselves XYZ, short for EXYes Zeppelin, a playful nod to the members' musical backgrounds. Still searching for a fresh start, Page soon found another opportunity. He joined forces with Paul Rodgers, the powerful vocalist best known for Bad Company, to form a new band called The Firm. Rodgers understood what it felt like to move on after the breakup of a hugely successful band, making him a natural creative partner for Page. The Firm released 2 studio albums before eventually going their separate ways. Although the project was relatively short-lived, Page later credited it with helping him rebuild both his confidence and his career after the emotional collapse that followed Bonham's death. For the first time in years, he finally felt as though he was moving forward. Then came another difficult moment. In 1985, the surviving members of Led Zeppelin reunited for Bob Geldof's Live Aid charity concert, with Phil Collins filling in on drums. On paper, it sounded like a dream reunion. In reality, almost everything that could go wrong did. The band had virtually no rehearsal time with Collins. Page was handed an out-of-tune guitar just before going on stage, and Robert Plant was battling serious vocal problems. The performance fell well below the standard fans expected from one of rock's greatest bands. The members themselves were so unhappy with the result that when the official Live Aid DVD was released in 2004, they refused permission for their performance to be included. Instead, they chose to support the charity through a financial donation. The disappointing reunion also placed additional strain on relationships within the band. Nearly a decade later, however, Page and Plant found themselves making music together once again. In 1994, the pair reunited for MTV's Unplugged series, although the performance evolved into something much bigger than a simple acoustic concert. Released under the title Unleaded, the project blended acoustic arrangements with Middle Eastern influences and introduced a fresh interpretation of Led Zeppelin's music. Fans embraced it. The success led directly to a major world tour, but one important person was missing from the lineup: John Paul Jones. Despite being one of Led Zeppelin's founding members, Jones was never invited to participate and, according to him, was not even informed that the reunion was taking place. His disappointment became public the following year. When Led Zeppelin was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995, Jones accepted his award alongside his former bandmates. During his brief speech, he delivered a line that instantly became one of the ceremony's most memorable moments, thanking his friends for finally remembering his phone number. The audience laughed, but the remark revealed genuine hurt beneath the humor. Years later, another collaboration ended just as unexpectedly. In 1999, Page joined forces with American rock band The Black Crowes for a highly praised tour and live album. Everything appeared to be going well until he suddenly left before the tour had finished, with official reports blaming back problems. That explanation turned out to be only part of the story. According to Page, he had suggested writing new music with brothers Chris and Rich Robinson, the band's principal songwriters. The idea was reportedly rejected, and Page felt deeply insulted by the response. Rather than continue under those circumstances, he chose to leave the tour altogether. The revelation stunned members of the Black Crowes, especially drummer Steve Gorman, who later admitted he was furious when he learned what had happened behind the scenes. By the late 2000s, Page was once again looking toward Led Zeppelin's future. In 2007, the surviving members reunited for the celebrated Ahmet Ertegun tribute concert at London's O2 Arena. Jason Bonham, the son of John Bonham, stepped behind the drum kit, and the performance was widely praised by critics and fans alike. Almost immediately, speculation began about a full-scale reunion tour. Page, John Paul Jones, and Jason Bonham were eager to continue performing together. The only obstacle was Robert Plant. Plant had already committed to touring with Alison Krauss and made it clear that he could not immediately return to Led Zeppelin. Rather than wait, Page and Jones reportedly began auditioning other singers in case the tour moved forward without him. In the end, those plans never became reality. For Plant, however, the idea that his longtime bandmates had considered replacing him was deeply upsetting. The proposed tour quietly disappeared, but the incident left another crack in the relationships between the surviving members. By that point, Jimmy Page had achieved almost everything a guitarist could dream of. He had helped shape modern rock music, built one of the most influential bands in history, and inspired generations of musicians. Jimmy Page revealed the only band better than Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page's career also left behind an important lesson for every rock band that came after him. Simply copying Led Zeppelin was never going to be enough. The band's music was built on a rare combination of songwriting, musicianship, and experimentation that could not simply be recreated by borrowing a few guitar riffs. History has shown that bands built entirely around nostalgia often struggle to last. They may capture attention at first, but without a fresh identity, that momentum usually fades. The rock world has seen that pattern play out, with more than a few revival acts over the years. Page understood that better than most. He appreciated musicians who respected the past, but he also believed that great bands needed to push rock music forward rather than simply recreate what had already been done. The artists who truly endured were the ones who took inspiration from their influences while adding something entirely their own. That is why comparisons between newer bands often reveal an important difference. Some groups wear their influences so openly that their music can feel like an attempt to recreate another era. Others treat those same influences as a foundation, building new ideas on top instead of repeating old ones. For Page, that willingness to evolve was what separated lasting artists from temporary trends. After all, Led Zeppelin never became one of the biggest bands in history by playing it safe. From the beginning, Page constantly searched for new sounds, blending blues, folk, hard rock, world music, and experimental production into something that had never existed before. That spirit of innovation became one of the band's defining strengths. The musicians who followed often found success by doing the same. Bands such as Aerosmith drew inspiration from Led Zeppelin's blues-driven sound, but developed a style that was unmistakably their own. Judas Priest took the band's heavier moments and pushed them even further, helping shape what would become heavy metal. Influence, Page believed, was most valuable when it inspired originality rather than imitation. Ironically, after Led Zeppelin came to an end, Page himself became more comfortable returning to the music that had first inspired him. Much of his work with the firm reflected his lifelong love of classic blues rock, while later collaborations with artists such as David Coverdale and Robert Plant often revisited the powerful guitar style that had defined Led Zeppelin's greatest albums. Some of those riffs could easily have belonged alongside the material on Physical Graffiti. It was familiar territory, but it was also where Page felt most at home. That didn't stop younger musicians from drawing inspiration from him. One band that particularly stood out was the Black Crowes. From the beginning of their career, the group embraced the traditions of blues-based rock without simply trying to become another Led Zeppelin. Songs like Hard to Handle and Twice as Hard showed just how deeply they understood the music that had inspired them. When Page eventually joined them on stage, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He later described the collaboration as an experience that rekindled the excitement he had felt while creating Led Zeppelin's earliest material. Since there would never be another Led Zeppelin, he didn't see the Black Crowes as a replacement. Instead, he viewed the partnership as a parallel journey that allowed him to revisit the kind of rich guitar arrangements he loved, while also exploring the band's own music. The Black Crowes were more than ready for the challenge. Their respect for Page's catalog was obvious long before he stepped on stage with them. Performances of songs like In My Time of Dying and 10 Years Gone captured much of the spirit and energy that had made those classics so memorable, while still allowing the band to perform them in their own voice. That was exactly what Page wanted. The goal was never to create a new version of Led Zeppelin or to relive the past exactly as it happened. Instead, he simply wanted to experience those songs again through musicians who genuinely understood them. For Page, hearing timeless tracks like 10 Years Gone come alive once more was not about recreating history. It was about celebrating the music in a way that honored its legacy while allowing a new generation of musicians to carry it forward.